When Senator John Kennedy's calculated, folksy cross-examination slammed into Representative Ilhan Omar's rehearsed defiance, it triggered a devastating 1-5-second silence that shattered her political armor and ignited a massive F3 Dural investigation. Senator Kennedy, I want to be very clear. I did not come here to be interrogated by a man whose state cannot keep its own levees standing, Ilhan Omar said. It was before the chairman finished his opening remarks. She said it, leaning into the microphone, her chin raised, eyes fixed not on Kennedy, but on the camera to her left. It was the one feeding her live stream to 1.4 million viewers. Her communications director, seated directly behind her, was already clipping the audio. Kennedy looked up from his legal pad. He had been drawing something. A crawfish, maybe. He blinked once behind his crooked reading glasses, then returned to his doodling. This hearing, Omar continued, her voice carrying the practiced calm of someone who had rehearsed this moment, is not oversight. It is theater. Political theater designed to criminalize immigrant communities and score points on Fox News, and I refuse to participate in it as a prop. Applause from the gallery scattered, then quickly died down. Omar's 3 color-coded folders sat untouched beside her. 1, 2, page-prepared statement. She did not need them. She had memorized the attack. Kennedy still had not spoken. His navy suit bunched at the elbows. A crawfish pin clung to his lapel. Between his water glass and his nameplate, a single manila folder lay closed. It had no label, just a sticky note in his own handwriting. Just ask questions. He finished his drawing, set down his pen, and looked at Omar the way a man looks at a pond, before deciding where to cast. Well, he said softly, that was something. He uncapped a fresh pen. Congresswoman, if you are done with your opening statement, I have got a few questions. Nothing complicated, just some things that do not quite add up. Should not take long. It took 26 minutes. By minute 14, Omar had stopped answering. By minute 20, her live stream was offline. By minute 26, she would ask the chairman for a recess he would not grant. And the simple country lawyer from Louisiana would still be sitting exactly as he was, now pen in hand, glasses crooked, crawfish half-finished on the legal pad, as if nothing of consequence had happened at all. But first, she had more to say. Omar was not Adam Schiff. She did not mock Kennedy's intelligence or his accent. She did something more sophisticated. She attacked his right to judge. Let me tell you something about this committee. Senator Omar's voice found its rhythm. It was the same rhythm that had moved crowds in Minneapolis, that had made grown men cry at naturalization ceremonies, and that had turned a refugee from Mogadishu into the first Somali American ever elected to Congress. I came to this country at the age of 12. I came with nothing. No English. No money. No connections. I came with my father and my siblings in a refugee resettlement program, and I built a life in a country that promised me, promised all of us, that where you start does not determine where you end. She paused, letting the cameras catch the stillness. I have sat in rooms like this before, rooms full of powerful men who believe their comfort gives them authority over other people's pain. And every time, the pattern is the same. They bring in the immigrant, they sit her at a table below them, they ask her to explain herself, and they call it oversight. A murmur of approval came from the Democratic side of the dais. Senator Durbin nodded. Someone in the gallery said, "That is right," just loud enough to register on the microphones. Omar leaned forward. Senator Kennedy, you represent the state of Louisiana, a state that ranks 49th in education, 50th in healthcare access, a state where children, American children born and raised, go to bed hungry every night because your legislature will not expand Medicaid. And you want to lecture me about program integrity? Kennedy was writing something on his legal pad. He did not look up. I buried family members before I was 10 years old. I watched my grandfather die in a refugee camp because there was no medicine. I spent 4 years in a tent in Kenya, Senator. 4 years. Do you know what it is like to be a child and not know if you will eat tomorrow? Not because of a government program, but because there is no government at all? She let the silence work in the gallery. A woman in a blue hijab pressed a tissue to her eyes. 2 rows behind her, a congressional aide typed "incredible moment" into a group chat. So, when I hear men in comfortable chairs talk about FR at UD in immigrant communities, when I see committee hearings designed to put a target on the backs of my neighbors, my constituents, people who came here the same way I did, I know exactly what this is. I have seen it before in Mogadishu, in Dadaab, and now in the United States Senate. She turned from Kennedy to the full panel. This is not oversight. This is spectacle, and the people performing it have no idea what it costs, the people on the other side of the stage. A beat, then she turned back to Kennedy specifically. You sit up there with your cute little sayings, your crawfish metaphors, your folksy routine, and the cameras love it. Fox News cannot get enough of it. But those sayings do not feed anyone, Senator. They do not house anyone. They do not keep anyone's family together. Her voice dropped a register. Where I come from, people who lost everything do not attack other survivors. That is something only people who have never lost anything do. The hearing room was quiet. In the press section, a reporter from the Associated Press wrote powerful testimony in her notebook, then crossed it out and wrote, extraordinary. Omar's live stream had climbed past 2 million viewers. The hashtag Omar Testifies was trending in 3 countries. Her communications director was texting clip timestamps to a dozen media contacts. On Twitter, a progressive commentator posted a single word, Queen, and it got 40,000 likes in 6 minutes. Kennedy finished writing. He flipped the legal pad to a fresh page and looked at Omar for the first time since she had begun. His expression was mild. Not angry, not defensive, not impressed, just attentive, a man listening carefully. Congresswoman, he said, that was very moving indeed. He removed his glasses, cleaned them slowly on his tie, the crawfish tie, the one his staff begged him not to wear to hearings, and put them back on, slightly more crooked than before. I grew up in Zachary, Louisiana, a little town north of Baton Rouge. No refugee camp. You are right about that. Just a regular American town with regular American problems. He tapped his pen against the notepad. But my mama did teach me something about manners. She said, Johnny, when someone is talking, you listen. When it is your turn, you ask. And when someone does not answer, you ask again. So, if you will allow me, Congresswoman, I would like to take my turn now. Omar sat back. She had delivered her attack. She had established the moral high ground. Now, she just needed to maintain it through a few predictable questions from a senator she considered beneath her. Go ahead, Senator. She gestured with an open palm. A performance of generosity. I have nothing to hide. Kennedy clicked his pen. Well, he said, let's start with something simple. Congresswoman, you mentioned your family came to America through the refugee resettlement program. That is a beautiful story, and I mean that sincerely. Can I ask how many siblings were listed on your family's entry documents? Omar answered without hesitation. 7. I was the youngest. 7. Kennedy wrote the number on his pad. And all 7 came with your father? Yes. Through the refugee program, proper documentation, the whole process, correct. Kennedy nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. Now, in 2009, you legally married a man named Ahmed Noor. Saeed Elmi? Is that correct? The shift was imperceptible. A straightening of the spine, a micro-adjustment of the hands on the table, but the veteran reporters in the front row caught it. Yes, Omar said. I have addressed this matter publicly many times. I am sure you have. Kennedy's voice remained gentle. Was Mr. Elmi a United States citizen at the time of your marriage? He was a British citizen. British citizen. And was Mr. Elmi listed on those same refugee entry documents, the ones with your 7 siblings? Omar's lawyer, seated behind her, leaned forward. Mr. Elmi was not a member of my immediate family, Omar said carefully. That is not exactly what I asked, but I appreciate the answer. Kennedy made a note. Now, you separated from Mr. Elmi in 2011, according to your public statements, divorced in your faith tradition, but you did not legally divorce him until 2017, 6 years later. Is that right? The legal process took time. There was no deception involved. No deception. Kennedy adjusted his glasses. But during those 6 years, 2011 to 2017, while you were still legally married to Mr. Elmi, you reconciled with Mr. Ahmed Hirsi, your first husband in the faith tradition. That is my personal life, Senator. It is. And normally I would not pry except for one thing. Kennedy looked down at his notepad. In 2014 and 2015, you filed joint federal tax returns with Mr. Hirsi, married filing jointly. Now, ma'am, I am just a country lawyer, but my understanding of 26 U.S. Code Section 613 is that you can only file jointly with someone you are legally married to. He looked up. Were you legally married to Mr. Hirsi in 2014? Silence. Because, according to the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board, not Fox News, not some blogger, but the official state board, you were legally married to Mr. Elmi, not Mr. Hirsi. These allegations have been investigated and resolved. Have they? Kennedy tilted his head. The board, F, ned you $500 and ordered you to repay $3,469 to your own campaign. 8 violations, Congresswoman, including using campaign funds to pay a law firm to fix those very same tax returns. Omar's jaw tightened. I complied with every finding. You did. You paid the F? Nay. Good for you. Kennedy tapped his pen. But paying a F, nay, does not answer the question. Were you legally married to Mr. Hirsi when you filed those joint returns, yes or no? Senator, this is exactly the kind of xenophobic fishing expedition that Congresswoman, Kennedy's voice did not rise, but something in it hardened. A rock under shallow water. I am not asking about xenophobia. I am asking about tax law, same law that applies to me, to you, to every married couple in America. Were you legally married to the man you filed taxes with, yes or no? Omar looked at her lawyer. The lawyer shook his head. An almost invisible movement. On the advice of counsel, Omar said quietly, I decline to answer that question at this time. The hearing room exhaled. Reporters typed. Omar's live stream comments shifted, the fire emojis replaced by question marks. Kennedy made a note and moved on, as if she had said nothing remarkable. I understand. Let's talk about money then. I am terrible with numbers. My wife handles the checkbook at home, but something has been bugging me about yours. Kennedy reached into his manila folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper, not a stack of documents, not a thick binder. 1 page. Congresswoman, this is public information from FEC filings, your campaign's financial disclosures. Anybody can look this up. I did it on my phone, which my grandson had to show me how to use, so it cannot be that complicated. He squinted at the paper. During the 2020 election cycle, your campaign spent approximately $5.7 million. Is that in the right ballpark? I would have to check the exact figures, but that sounds approximately correct. Approximately correct, good enough for government work. Kennedy ran his finger down the page. Now, of that $5.7 million, approximately $2.8 million went to one company, the E Street Group. That is a political consulting firm co-owned by your husband, Mr. Tim Minette, is that right? The E Street Group provided comprehensive campaign services, advertising, digital media, direct mail, fundraising, consulting. So that is a yes. Kennedy picked up his pen and did something unexpected. He stood up slowly, like a man working out stiff knees, walked to a small whiteboard at the side of the dais, and wrote two numbers, $2,022.8 million to E Street Group, husband as firm, $2,022 $1 million to other firms, same services. Now, Congresswoman, I am no mathematician. I barely passed algebra in high school, but even I can see that the same work cost $1.8 million less once your husband stopped doing it. He turned from the whiteboard. Can you explain that? Omar straightened. The E Street Group provided comprehensive services that encompassed multiple functions. Comparing raw numbers without context is dishonest, and you know it, Senator. Kennedy paused, nodded slowly. Fair point. Fair point. Context is important. He walked back to his seat, easing into it like a man settling into a fishing boat. So, let me add some context. He pulled out a second sheet. Your financial disclosure forms, also public, also on the internet, which my grandson tells me is a series of tubes. He put on his glasses. In 2023, your husband's winery, East ISI Crew LLC, based in California, was valued at up to $50,000 on your disclosure. His venture capital firm, Rose Lake Capital, was valued at somewhere between $1 and $1,000. He looked up. $1,000. That is about what I spend on crawfish in a good month. A few low laughs echoed in the gallery, but then I look at 2024. Kennedy flipped the page. Same winery, now valued at up to $5 million. Same venture capital firm, now valued at between $5 million and $25 million. He set the paper down and took off his glasses. Congresswoman, I do not know much about venture capital. I know a little about wine. I prefer beer. And I know a fair amount about fishing. And where I come from, when a minnow turns into a whale overnight, something is in the water. Omar's communications director had stopped texting. The live stream comments were scrolling fast, too fast to read, and the tone had changed. Those valuations reflect the full cost assessment of the businesses, Omar said, her voice measured but tighter than before. My husband is one of several partners. The numbers do not represent his individual share, and I have no involvement in his business ventures. Several partners? Kennedy scratched his head. Well, I looked up the California business records for that winery. Public records. Anyone can find them. They show two individuals on the statement of organization. 2. Your husband is one of them. He let that sit. Does not seem like several to me. Seems like 2, but maybe California counts differently than Louisiana. He reached for one more sheet of paper. Now, here is the thing that has really been keeping me up at night, and I want to be careful here because I am just a simple country lawyer and this is complicated financial stuff. But your husband's company, one of them, had its funds frozen by the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC. He looked at the cameras. For folks watching at home who do not know, OFAC is the office that monitors financial transactions related to T3, RR, terrorism, international sanctions, and dealings with enemies of the United States. He turned back to Omar. Can you tell me why your husband's business was flagged by the same office that tracks T3, RR, risk financing? The hearing room went still. Omar did not answer immediately. Her lawyer was writing something on a notepad and sliding it toward her. She read it, then looked up. I am not going to dignify conspiracy theories with a response. My husband's businesses are legitimate, and any financial matters are being handled through proper legal channels. Proper legal channels? Kennedy wrote something on his pad, like the DOJ investigation that was confirmed this year. That investigation is politically motivated. Maybe so, maybe so. Kennedy put his glasses back on. But the numbers are not political, Congresswoman. 50,000 to 5 million in 12 months. That is arithmetic. And the Treasury does not freeze accounts for political reasons. They freeze accounts when money moves in ways that concern them. He let that sit. Then, almost as an afterthought, oh, and one more thing about the E Street Group. I almost forgot. He had not almost forgotten. Your husband's ex-wife, Dr. Beth Minette, filed for divorce in 2019. In the divorce filings, public record, Congresswoman, all public record, she stated that her husband had told her he was, and I am quoting the filing, romantically involved with you, and she alleged that his travel and long work hours were more related to his affair with Representative Omar than with his actual work commitments. Kennedy looked at the ceiling as if trying to remember something. Now, the FEC complaint pointed out that campaign payments to the E Street Group for Mr. Minette's travel began the same month he reportedly told his wife about the relationship. So the question becomes, were those travel payments for campaign work, or were they for something else? The FEC reviewed this complaint and found no reason to believe any law was violated. Omar said. Her voice was controlled but thinner now, the way fabric stretches before it tears. They did dismiss the complaint, you are right. Kennedy nodded agreeably. But that was when the FEC had 3 vacancies and could not reach a quorum to take action on much of anything. The watchdog was muzzled. As one former commissioner put it, he shrugged. Still, you are technically correct. And technically correct is the best kind of correct, I suppose. In the press section, the AP reporter had stopped writing words. She was just underlining things. 3 seats to her right, a reporter from the Star Tribune was pulling up Omar's financial disclosures on his laptop, checking Kennedy's numbers against the originals. They matched. He closed his folder, not dramatically, just closed it the way you would close a book when you are done with a chapter. Let's move on. I want to talk about something that matters more than money. Kennedy's voice changed, not louder, quieter. The folksy warmth did not disappear, but something settled underneath it like silt at the bottom of a river when the current slows. Congresswoman, let's leave the money for a moment. I want to talk about children, specifically children who were supposed to eat. Omar stiffened. She knew what was coming. You represent Minnesota's 5th Congressional District. Beautiful district, good people. But it is also the district where the majority of the Feeding Our Future FR at UD occurred. You are familiar with that case? Of course I am. I have spoken about it publicly many times and condemned the FR at UD in the strongest possible terms. You have, and I appreciate that. Kennedy leaned back in his chair. For folks at home who might not know the details, Feeding Our Future was a nonprofit that was supposed to distribute meals to children during the pandemic. Federal money, taxpayer money, your money, and mine. Prosecutors say they Saint Zero over $250 million. 78 people have been CH at RGD, more than 57 0 evicted. They set up fake meal sites, claimed to serve 90 million meals, made up children's names on attendance rosters, invented kids who did not exist to St. 3Al food money from kids who did. He paused, letting the weight of that settle. And according to federal prosecutors, only about 3 cents of every dollar actually went to food. 3 cents. The rest went to luxury cars, real estate in Turkey and Kenya, cash. 97 cents of every dollar meant for hungry children ended up in someone's pocket. He looked down at the table. They created fake meal sites. Congresswoman, 250 of them. Some were in strip malls that had not been open in years. Some were addresses that did not exist. One site, a small market in a town called Waite Park, claimed to serve 2,000 meals a day. Every day. 500,000 meals from a building the size of a gas station. And to justify it, they filled out attendance sheets with the names of children who were never there. Made up names, made up ages. Ghost children eating ghost meals, while real children went hungry. In the gallery, the woman in the blue hijab, the one who had cried during Omar's opening statement, was listening with her hands pressed together. Kennedy looked at Omar. Now, Congresswoman, on March 11, 2020, you introduced the Meals Act. That legislation relaxed federal requirements for school meal programs, made it easier for organizations to participate. Reduced oversight requirements. Federal prosecutors have said those relaxed requirements were exploited to St. 3Al hundreds of millions of dollars. Do you accept any responsibility for creating the framework that enabled this? Omar leaned into the microphone. The Meals Act helped feed children during a national crisis. Schools were closed. Families were desperate. The FR at UD was committed by criminals who exploited a program designed to help people, and I will not allow anyone to blame the program for the actions of criminals. Fair enough. Kennedy's voice remained even. The program was meant to help. I believe that. But I have got some questions about the neighborhood, if you will bear with me. He did not reach for any documents. He spoke from memory. Your campaign received donations from individuals who were later C0 evicted in the Feeding Our Future case. Is that correct? When those connections came to light, I returned every dollar immediately out of an abundance of caution. Out of an abundance of caution. That is a nice phrase. Kennedy tilted his head. You also held campaign events at the Safari restaurant in Minneapolis. The owner of that restaurant was C0, evicted in connection with the FR at UD. You knew him. Safari Restaurant was a well-known gathering place in the community. Many politicians held events there. This does not imply. I am not implying anything, Congresswoman. I am asking. Kennedy's pen tapped the notepad. 1, 2, 3. A member of your own congressional staff was C0. Evicted in connection with the Feeding Our Future FR at UD. A person on your payroll. How does someone working in your office end up in a federal FR at UD case involving your district? Staff members' personal actions outside of work are not my responsibility. They are not. You are right. Kennedy nodded. But let me make sure I understand the picture. You wrote the legislation that relaxed oversight. The FR at UD happened in your district. You took money from people involved in the FR at UD. You held events at a business involved in the FR at UD. Someone on your staff was C0 evicted in the FR at UD. He counted on his fingers, slowly, one at a time. The way a man counts change at a store counter. That is 5 connections. Not one, not a coincidence. 5. And your answer is that none of it is your responsibility. He paused, then quietly, you know who it was responsible to? The kids. The ones who were supposed to eat. The ones whose names were never on those attendance sheets because they were real children. And real children do not fit neatly into a FAR at UD scheme. Those kids, your constituents, Congresswoman, they went without, and somebody bought a Mercedes. Omar's eyes flashed. This was where she was strongest, the counterattack. Senator, her voice rose for the first time, and it carried genuine force. I returned every dollar the moment questions arose. I cooperated with every in.3 stigation, and I will not sit here and let you use the secker.mez of individuals to smear an entire community that I represent and love. I know what this is. This is what happens every time people in power want to punish immigrants. You find a few bad actors, and you blame everyone who looks like them. You did it after 9/11. You are doing it now, and the people of my district see exactly what you are doing. The gallery stirred. Someone in the back applauded, a few voices joined in. On Omar's live stream, which her team had quietly turned back on during the money discussion, supportive comments surged. For a moment, it felt like the hearing room had tilted back in her direction. The moral authority she had established at the beginning was reasserting itself, and she could feel it. The familiar gravity of being the one who speaks for the voiceless. Kennedy waited. He let the applause fade. He let the room settle completely, until the only sound was the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant clicking of a camera shutter. Then he spoke. Congresswoman, I am not blaming any community. I want to be very clear about that. His voice was steady and unhurried. I think most Somali Americans in Minnesota are good, decent, hard-working people who got robbed by this FR at UD, just like every other taxpayer. They are victims, too. Maybe the biggest victims, because now their whole community gets painted with a brush that should only touch the people who St. Zero Lee the money. He let that land. Then his voice narrowed. I am not asking about a community. I am asking about you. Not refugees, not immigrants, not Somali Americans. You, the congresswoman who wrote the legislation, who took the donations, who hired the staff member, who held events at the restaurant. He leaned forward. The chair creaked. What did you know, and when did you know it? The question hung in the air. Omar opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. Kennedy sat back and made a small note on his legal pad. The sound of pen on paper was the loudest thing in the room. Let me ask you about something else, he said, as gently as a man changing the subject at a dinner party. The words, Congresswoman, you said something at the beginning of this hearing that stuck with me. You said, and I wrote it down, because I wanted to get it right. Words from people in power can destroy communities. Did I get that right? That is correct. I agree with you, words matter, especially from people who hold public office. Kennedy looked at his notepad. Not his folder, just the notes he had taken during Omar's opening statement. So, I would like to look at some of your words, if that is all right. Omar's hands were flat on the table. Her lawyer shifted in his seat. In 2012, you tweeted, and this is a direct quote, Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel. Kennedy read slowly, letting each word land. Hypnotized the world. Those are your words, Congresswoman. I have addressed that tweet and apologized. You have? And I will get to that. Kennedy held up a finger. In February 2019, when asked about political support for Israel, you tweeted, It is all about the Benjamins, baby. When pressed on what you meant, you pointed to AIPAC. the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee, suggesting that Jewish money was buying political influence. That is a mischaracterization of my point, which was about lobbying. A few weeks later, at a public event, you said, and again I am quoting, "I want to talk about the political influence in this country that says it is okay to push for allegiance to a foreign country." Kennedy looked up. Allegiance to a foreign country. Do you know what that phrase means to Jewish Americans, Congresswoman? I was talking about lobbying, not about Jewish Americans as a group. Your own party leadership disagreed. Kennedy's voice did not rise. It never rose. Speaker Nancy Pelosi, the most powerful Democrat in the country, the woman who defended you on almost everything else, issued a public condemnation. The entire Democratic leadership signed a joint statement. Anti-S. Three-mightism must be called out, confronted, and condemned whenever it is encountered, without exception. Those were their words about your words. Kennedy set down his notepad. In 2023, you were removed from the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Members of both parties, Congresswoman, cited your anti-S three-mitic remarks as the reason. The hearing room was very quiet. Omar's live stream had dropped below 800,000 viewers. Her communications director had stopped texting. Now, you mentioned you apologized. I want to talk about that because I think apologies matter. Kennedy adjusted his glasses. You apologized for the Benjamin's tweet. You said anti-S three-mightism is real. And you unequivocally apologize. Good. That is the right thing to do. But a few weeks later, you made the allegiance to a foreign country comment. So the apology was followed by more of the same. He scratched his chin. Where I come from, Congresswoman, an apology that is followed by the same behavior isn't an apology. It's a press release. The line landed. A few people in the gallery shifted. A Senate aide on the Republican side covered his mouth. Now, Kennedy continued, you told me earlier that words from people in power can destroy communities. I agree. When a sitting congresswoman tweets that Israel has hypnotized the world, Jewish families in your own district hear the oldest conspiracy theory in the book. When you say it is all about the Benjamins, Jewish business owners hear the oldest stereotype in history, that J3WS control things with money. When you talk about allegiance to a foreign country, Jewish Americans hear the dual loyalty accusation that has been used to persecute their people for centuries. Kennedy's voice dropped, not to a whisper, but to the tone of a man saying something he means with every part of himself. You asked me earlier where my compassion was. I am asking you now, where was yours? Omar's eyes glistened. She blinked rapidly twice but did not look away. Her chin stayed raised. Even now, even here, she would not give the cameras the image of a woman looking down. Kennedy was not done. There is one more thing. In January of last year, you spoke at an event in Minneapolis. You spoke in Somali, to a Somali-American audience. The translated video, which has been widely reported, shows you telling that audience that the United States government would, and I am using the translation here, follow the lead of Somali Americans, and that Somalia would remain safe as long as you hold your seat in Congress. He let the translation repeat itself in the room's silence. Follow the lead. Somalia would be safe as long as she held her seat. Now, I understand speaking to your community in their language. That is natural. That is fine. I speak Cajun French with my cousins, and half of what I say would make a Parisian faint. A small beat, but he did not let the room laugh. But the content of what you said, Congresswoman, that troubles me. Because you were not talking about Minnesota. You were not talking about schools, or roads, or health care in your district. You were telling an audience that you would use your seat in the United States Congress to protect a foreign nation. He picked up his pen and turned it slowly between his fingers. Congresswoman, when you took the oath of office, you placed your hand on a Quran, which is your right, and I respect that. And you swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, not Somalia, not any particular community, the United States of America. He looked at her directly, not unkindly, not cruelly, but the way a teacher looks at a student who has been caught and knows it. Whose interests do you serve? The question landed like a stone in still water. The ripples spread outward through the hearing room, through the press section, through the live stream, through the millions watching on cable news. It was the kind of question that did not require an answer to do its damage. The asking was the answer. Omar sat motionless. Her prepared statement, 12 pages, 3 folders, color-coded, lay untouched on the table in front of her. Her communications director had put down her phone. The live stream was still running, but nobody on her team was monitoring it. Her lips parted. She inhaled. I serve the people of Minnesota's 5th District, she said, and I serve the Constitution, the same Constitution that allowed a 2-year-old refugee to become a congresswoman. I will not let anyone, question my loyalty to this country. It was a good answer, practiced, strong, dignified. On any other day, it would have been enough. But it came 15 seconds too late. And in the age of social media, 15 seconds of silence after, whose interests do you serve, was a lifetime. The clip was already being cut. The screenshot of her frozen face was already being shared. By the time she finished her sentence, the moment had already escaped her control. Kennedy removed his reading glasses and placed them on the table slowly, deliberately, the way a man sets down a tool when the work is done. When he looked up, something had shifted in his face. The folksy crinkles around his eyes had smoothed. The permanent half-smile had settled into something flatter, more direct. The accent did not disappear, but the drawl shortened. The words came quicker. And for the first time all morning, John Kennedy sounded less like a country storyteller and more like what he was, a man who had graduated with first-class honors from Oxford and spent 17 years managing the finances of an entire state. Congresswoman, he said, you came here today and called me cruel, said I do not understand what it is like to suffer. You may be right. I grew up in Louisiana, not a refugee camp. I will not pretend otherwise. He folded his hands on the table. But I understand arithmetic. $2.8 million to your husband's company, a winery worth $50,000 that became worth $5 million in 12 months. A venture capital firm that went from $1,000 to $25 million in the same period. Campaign donations from C0 Invicted FR at UD-Esters. An entire district where $250 million was St. Zero Len. From children who never ate the meals that money was supposed to buy. His voice was level. No anger, no triumph. Just facts laid end to end. I understand words, hypnotized the world. All about the Benjamins, allegiance to a foreign country. You told me this morning that words matter. I agree. Your words mattered to every Jewish family in your district who heard their congresswoman reach for the same stereotypes that have been used against them for 1,000 years. He picked up his glasses and turned them in his hands. And I understand oaths. You took one when you became a citizen of this country at the age of 17. You took another when you entered Congress. 2 oaths, both sacred. The question this committee has to answer, the question the people of Minnesota have to answer, is simple. He put the glasses back on. The drawl returned just slightly, like a tide coming back in. Did you keep them? He turned to the chairman. Mr. Chairman, I believe we have taken enough of the Congresswoman's time. She has got important work to do. Lord knows Minnesota could use some oversight right about now. Omar stood, reached for her microphone. A burst of feedback cut through the room, a sharp electronic whine that made everyone wince. She pulled her hand back. The microphone settled. She opened her mouth to speak, but the chairman had already moved on, recognizing the next senator for questions. She sat back down. Her 3 color-coded folders, her 1 2-page statement, her prepared counterattacks, all of it untouched, unused, irrelevant. Her communications director reached forward and turned off the phone that had been live streaming. The red dot went dark. Kennedy was already doodling again, another crawfish. He added a little top hat to this one and showed it to his aide, who smiled politely and had no idea what it meant. Nobody in the room spoke to Omar. Not her lawyer, who was packing his briefcase. Not her aide, who was staring at a phone full of notifications she did not want to open. Not the Democratic senators on the dais, who had discovered urgent business on their own phones. The cameras stayed on Kennedy for another 30 seconds, hoping for a reaction, a victory lap, a sound bite. He gave them nothing. He just doodled, checked his watch, an old Timex with a cracked leather band, and wrote one word at the bottom of his legal pad. The word was done. The clip traveled the way things travel now, fast. Fragmented, out of context, in context, with captions, without captions, remixed, memed, analyzed, weaponized. By evening, Whose Interests Do You Serve had been viewed 22 million times across platforms. The 15 seconds of silence that followed it had been viewed even more. Fox News led with it at 6:00. Kennedy to Omar, Whose interests do you serve? Ran the chyrons above footage of Omar's frozen expression, played in slow motion. Conservative commentators called it the most devastating 6 words in Senate history. By 8:00, the clip had been translated into Somali, Arabic, and Hebrew, and was circulating in communities that rarely shared the same content. CNN and MSNBC tried to reframe. Kennedy's gotcha moment ignores Omar's substantive testimony, read one headline. A panel of analysts argued that the questions were leading, that the financial disclosures had reasonable explanations, that the feeding our future connections were guilt by association. They were not wrong about any of these things. It did not matter. The clip had already done what clips do. On Capitol Hill, the response was carefully calibrated. House Democratic leadership issued a statement supporting Omar's courage in facing a hostile hearing environment, but notably did not address the substance of Kennedy's questions. 3 moderate Democrats from swing districts declined to comment. The Congressional Progressive Caucus released a longer statement, calling the hearing a weaponization of congressional power against women of color. But 2 members who usually signed such statements did not. Chairman Comer of the House Oversight Committee announced that his panel would be issuing sub-zero INAs for financial documents from Tim Mynett's companies within the week. The DOJ, asked to comment on the ongoing investigation into Omar's finances, issued a 1-sentence statement. We do not comment on the existence or status of any investigation, which, as any Washington reporter knew, was itself a comment. The IRS did not comment at all. In Minneapolis, the Jewish Community Relations Council issued a measured statement. It noted that Kennedy had raised legitimate concerns about the impact of anti-S3-mitic rhetoric from elected officials and called for continued dialogue. It was diplomatic, careful, and unremarkable, except that within 72 hours, 3 local rabbis who had previously defended Omar's right to criticize Israeli policy published an open letter in the Star Tribune. We defended Congresswoman Omar's right to question American foreign policy, they wrote. We did not defend the use of anti-S-3 tropes, and we should have said so more clearly. Senator Kennedy's questions were not an attack on Muslims or immigrants. They were a mirror, held up to words that caused real harm to our community. The letter collected over 4,000 signatures in a week. In Minnesota, Omar returned home to a solidarity rally organized by allies at a community center in Cedar Riverside. The room held 400, about 270 showed up. Those who came were passionate, defiant, certain that their congresswoman had been ambushed by Iraq. Saint institution. They chanted her name. They held signs. They promised to knock on doors, but outside, a local television crew interviewed a Somali-American grocery store owner named Abdi, who had voted for Omar 3 times. He stood with his arms crossed and said, "I love her, but she did not answer the questions. I want her to answer the questions." The interview aired on the 1000 News, and by morning it had been shared more times than anything the Solidarity Rally produced. 2 weeks later, a former Minneapolis city councilman, a moderate Democrat with deep community ties, announced he would challenge Omar in the primary. He held his press conference at a Somali restaurant and spoke for 40 minutes about grocery prices, school funding, and FR at UD prevention. He did not mention Kennedy. He did not need to. Then the sub-P0 hit. Comer's Oversight Committee moved fast, faster than anyone expected. Within 10 days of the hearing, Tim Minette received sub-0 for financial records from East Crew LLC, Rose Lake Capital LLC, and every personal bank account connected to either entity. The scope was broad. The language was not polite. Minette's attorney called it an unprecedented fishing expedition. Comer's office called it standard oversight procedure. 3 days after the sub-0 a second development, the Star Tribune reported that federal investigators from the DOJ's Public Integrity Section, not the politically appointed leadership, but career prosecutors, had been interviewing former employees of the E Street Group since before the hearing. 2 former staffers had already provided documents. A grand jury in the District of Columbia had been impaneled. The story ran below the fold, modest and factual. But the words grand jury carried their own gravity. Omar's legal team expanded overnight. The criminal defense attorney she retained, a former federal prosecutor named David Kenner, who had represented 2 sitting governors and a Fortune 500 CEO, did not come cheap and did not take cases he expected to lose quickly. His first public statement was 3 sentences long. Congresswoman Omar has not been coup at RGD. Had me. She is cooperating with all lawful inquiries. We are confident she will be fully vindicated. The statement was notable for what it was not. It was not defiant. It was not political. It was the language of someone preparing for a long fight. The IRS moved quietly, as the IRS always does. No press conferences, no leaks. But Omar's accountant received a letter, certified mail, return receipt requested, informing him that the 2014 and 2015 joint tax returns filed by Ilhan Omar and Ahmed Hirsi were under review. The letter requested all supporting documentation within 30 days. It was signed by a senior agent in the IRS CR, Criminal Investigation Division. CR, criminal, not civil. Omar's accountant called Kenner before he called Omar. In Congress, the House Ethics Committee opened a preliminary inquiry. The quiet kind. The kind that generates no headlines until it generates an indictment or a dismissal. 3 members of the committee privately told colleagues they expected the inquiry to expand. One of them, a Republican from Ohio, told a reporter off the record. The financial disclosures alone are a problem. The tax filings are a bigger problem, and if what Comer's people are finding in those business records is half of what I am hearing, she is going to need that lawyer. Tim Minette stopped appearing in public. His social media accounts went dark. Roselake Capital's website, which had once boasted of vast international experience in structuring deals, mergers, and acquisitions, was taken down. In its place, a single page with the company name and a contact email. No team photos, no advisory board, no mention of assets under management. The venture capital firm that had gone from $1,000 to $25 million in 12 months was, digitally at least, trying to become invisible again. Omar's fundraising cratered. In the quarter following the hearing, her campaign raised $340,000, down from $1.2 million in the same quarter the previous year. Small dollar donations, the lifeblood of her political brand, dropped by 60%. The big progressive PACs that had backed her in every previous cycle went silent. Not hostile, silent, which in Washington is worse. One evening, weeks after the hearing, Omar sat alone in her congressional office. The lights were off, except for the glow of a laptop screen. She had opened the hearing video, the full, unedited version, not the clips, and scrubbed to the 23rd minute. Kennedy's voice, thin through laptop speakers. Whose interests do you serve? She watched her own face. The 15 seconds. The silence. She had given hundreds of speeches since then. She had appeared on MSNBC twice, on Al Jazeera once, at 3 community events, and a fundraiser where she raised less than half of what she had raised at the same event the year before. She had issued a written statement. Careful, lawyered, defiant, calling the hearing a politically motivated circus designed to distract from Republican attacks on working families. Her progressive allies had amplified it. AOC had posted a thread. Rashida had called her on the phone. None of it had dislodged the clip. None of it had replaced those 15 seconds with anything else. And none of it, not the speeches, not the statements, not the solidarity, had stopped the grand jury from meeting every Thursday morning in a windowless room in the E. Barrett Prettyman Federal Courthouse, 3 miles from where she sat. She closed the laptop, sat in the dark. On her desk, next to the laptop, sat a legal folder her attorney had sent over that afternoon. She had not opened it. The tab read, Omar Potential Exposure Summary. She knew what was inside because Kenner had walked her through it on the phone. His voice was calm and precise, the way doctors talk when the diagnosis is serious but not yet terminal. Tax FR at UD carries up to 5 years per count. Immigration FR at UD carries up to 5 years and potential denaturalization. Campaign finance violations carry FAR, NES, and up to 5 years. Conspiracy, CH, at RGS compound. He had not said, "You are going to son." He had said, "We need to prepare for every scenario." In Washington, those 2 sentences mean the same thing. Outside, the Capitol dome was lit against the night sky, the way it always is. The way it was lit the first time she saw it as a newly elected congresswoman from Minnesota, when she had placed her hand on a Quran and sworn an oath she believed in with every part of herself. She still believed in it. That was the thing Kennedy would never understand. She told herself. She still believed. She had survived a civil war, a refugee camp, 4 years in Kenya, the culture shock of an American middle school, the death threats that started the day she announced her candidacy, the go back where you came from shouts on the Capitol steps. She had survived all of it. She would survive this. But the folder sat on the desk unopened. And the question hung in the dark office like a sound that will not stop echoing. And for the first time since she was 12 years old and sleeping on a dirt floor in Dadab, Ilhan Omar was not sure she knew what came next. That Friday, Kennedy flew home to Louisiana. His wife picked him up at the Baton Rouge airport in the same Buick she had been driving for 11 years. "How was Washington?" she asked, as he folded himself into the passenger seat. "Same as always." He buckled his seatbelt. "Lot of talking, not enough listening." They drove in comfortable silence through Zachary, past the feed store and the Baptist church and the pecan trees that lined the road to their house. He carried his briefcase inside, dropped it by the door, and walked out to the back porch. The bayou stretched out flat and dark beyond the yard. Crickets, frogs, a barred owl somewhere in the cypress trees, asking its four-note question over and over. "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you?" Kennedy settled into the porch chair, the one with the creaky armrest he kept meaning to fix, and opened the latest issue of The Economist. His reading glasses, the same ones he had worn at the hearing, sat slightly crooked on his nose. His legal pad from the hearing lay on the side table, still open to the last page. The doodle was visible, a crawfish wearing a top hat, but around it, in handwriting so small you would need the glasses to read it, were dates, dollar amounts, names, a timeline that began in 2009 and ended in 2024, with every connection mapped in the margins between cartoon crustaceans. He had known everything before he walked into that room. Every question had been written weeks in advance. The doodling, the fumbling with glasses, the "I am just a simple country lawyer," all of it was scaffolding, designed to make a woman who believed herself the smartest person in any room comfortable enough to stop guarding the doors. His wife came out with 2 glasses of sweet tea. She set one on the armrest and looked out at the bayou. "Your phone has been ringing all afternoon," she said. "Fox wants you, CNN wants you, that podcast your grandson likes wants you." Kennedy did not look up from The Economist. "Tell them I am reading. They are saying you are a hero. I asked some questions that is not heroic. That is my job." She sat down next to him. The porch creaked. "Did you catch anything today?" she asked. It was what she always asked. It had nothing to do with fishing. Kennedy turned a page. "Just asked some questions," he said. "Have not gotten all the answers yet, but I will." He took a sip of sweet tea and looked out at the bayou, where the water was dark and still and patient, the way water always is when it knows the fish have nowhere else to go. When the cameras stop rolling and the viral clips fade, what ultimately remains when the fragile scaffolding of political theater is entirely stripped away?